The stories that I'd like to share with you today are stories about the future of cybersecurity. But the idea is that we need to learn about the world of cybersecurity from the hacker perspective. And I myself consider myself a friendly hacker. I grew up right here in beautiful sunny Tel Aviv, where I'm speaking to you all. And I was a very curious young little girl. I asked my parents so many questions that instead of a bedtime story, I got volumes of the encyclopedia. And when I turned 14, I met a hacker mentor that really showed me that hackers are the ones that have access to all of the world's information at their fingertips. My hacker mentor, Angelina Jolie. Hopefully you recognize her from this photo from 1995 as she portrayed a fierce high school hacker in a Hollywood movie simply called Hackers. For me, the movie showed that hackers can be heroes and that their capabilities are significant. So today, I'd like to share with you stories about cyber criminals and about hackers and what we can learn from the hackers and the cyber criminals of this world, because both friendly and malicious hackers have a lot to teach us. In 2014, I shared my idea that hackers can actually sometimes be elements in a digital immune system for our new connected era. And today, I think we all need that digital immune system more than ever before. And we need to learn these stories and understand how this digital world is changing. And hackers are actually the early adopters. They're the ones that can teach us that. Now, you've heard earlier this morning all about ransomware. What I want to focus on is the lessons we can learn from ransomware, and specifically lessons about what I like to call malicious innovation. Because in the world of ransomware, there are incredible evolutions and innovations that are happening. Take, for example, this scary character called Ryak. You might have heard about this ransomware. And it's actually called Ryak because of a very scary Japanese animation series character, the God of Death. So these criminals went for a scary brand. And if you don't know the animation series, ask your teenagers. It's called Death Note. Now, Ryak is, of course, ransomware. So it doesn't leave a death note, it leaves a ransom note. And what it has done in the last 2 years, other than attack universities, government agencies, hospitals, and multi-billion euro companies all across the world, it's also evolved. So from a fascinating report by the French security agency ANSSI, we've learned that Ryak evolved to include worm capabilities that allow it to spread faster from computer to computer and from organization to organization. It also uses scheduled tasks and remote procedure calls. Scheduled tasks and remote procedure calls are elements that are part of the operating system and a normal network environment. And they actually enable Ryak to hide within legitimate network traffic. Now, a lot of the changes and the evolutions in ransomware strains are actually meant to reduce the time from the initial intrusion until the attackers can get paid. This is a major motivation for a lot of the attack groups behind tools like Ryak. Now, there's another lesson here as well. In the last 2 years, we've all had to learn about how the COVID and the coronavirus evolve and it has variants. Malware and ransomware, just like Ryak, evolve. They have variants and they continuously change so that they can target and address more organizations. However, they're not a creation of evolution or biology or a lab. They're made by planners and managers, not by hackers sitting in basements. Rather, I'd like you to think about people like that, sitting in offices somewhere around the world, quite possibly in St. Petersburg in Russia, planning and managing their assets. And we know from internal communications from the TrickBot ransomware gang and the Conti ransomware gang, because they have had leaks in the last 2 years that really show us their internal communications. They hire dozens of people, they have normal offices, they keep office hours, they have training facilities, they invest in server farms and equipment. And in fact, according to an expose by Wired magazine, one gang, TrickBot, recently invested more than $20 million simply in their infrastructure. Now, of course, when you're a criminal gang that brings in millions of dollars in revenue, you also invest back into your development. Now, you might have heard that some of these ransomware gangs are being taken down or arrested by law enforcement operations, including in Russia. Don't be fooled by these messages, because oftentimes what we end up seeing is that these clever criminals evolve and adapt even their business persona. So they merge into another ransomware gang. For example, in 2022, TrickBot and most of its operations have been taken over by the Conti ransomware gang. Now, the reason I'm telling you these stories is because I think it's really crucial we understand attacker behaviors. These are clever business people. They are not lonesome hackers sitting in basements. And in fact, there's a fantastic report done on the Conti ransomware attack on the Irish healthcare systems from just 2021. So this is the independent post-incident review that the Irish HSE board actually engaged PwC to produce. I really recommend you read this report, 157 pages. Now, to give you an incentive to read this report, here's a Twitter from a security researcher called Matt Taggart, who says, reading through the whole incident report for this Irish Conti attack, this thing needs to be taught in every defense course. There's so much that we can learn from it as defenders. I want to give you just a few highlights. So one of the things they identified was that there was actually a long dwell time on the patient zero device. So the first device the attackers infected, they spent more than a month on that device. And during that month, there was actually activity that was detected but not blocked. So some of the existing security tools that they had over there actually identified Mimikatz and Cobalt Strike on the network, moving around, creating lateral movement. They were detected, but they were not blocked. Now, I'll go back to what Mimikatz and Cobalt Strike are in a minute. Now, the most fascinating lesson for me was that the day that this healthcare organization decided to actually install an EDR product, within 24 hours, the attackers launched the ransomware campaign. That shows you they were on the network. They saw the deployment of new security capabilities coming through the network, coming through the organization, and they decided to pull the trigger on their attack. They are planned, they are strategic. Now, I mentioned Cobalt Strike. Cobalt Strike is originally a tool developed for security testing and penetration testing, but it's actually commonly used by a lot of attackers. And there's no reason not to detect and block against it. This is a known capability. It's not a zero-day tool. It's a framework, a tool set, and it's something that's in the arsenal of every hacker. Similar to it is Mimikatz, a tool originally developed by a friendly security researcher in France. And this one is used to harvest Windows passwords and to move laterally. So these are well-known capabilities still being used at large by these criminals. Now, I also want to spend a moment talking about the initial infection vectors for a lot of these attacks, because I think there are new approaches that can help us deal with these infection vectors. Classic infection vector for a lot of these attacks is a phishing email, an email that tricks somebody into clicking or running an application, usually a Microsoft Office file. Another classic infection route is through credentials, somebody's passwords, whether they had recycled that password and used it again, maybe it's already been leaked, or perhaps it's just easy to crack. Now, the third most sophisticated infection vector is when these attack groups target the actual remote connections of the company. And maybe they even find an exploit in a firewall or VPN product. And this is perhaps the most difficult one to protect against. And as mentioned earlier, attackers are also taking advantage of new vulnerabilities. So within hours from the discovery of the Log4j and the Log4Shell exploit in December 10th, within hours, we saw on tools like Grey Noise attacks that were trying to take advantage of it. So this is a scanning result from Grey Noise. Grey Noise is a scanning engine for internet scanning. I'll repeat that. It's a tool that allows security defenders to identify when attackers are running massive scans on the internet. And what I'd like you to focus on here is that this is an attempt for remote code execution using the Log4j capability, and it's from December 10th, the very same day the vulnerability was first reported. So if you're a defender and you're not using this know-how and these capabilities, you're going to be losing the race. Attackers are moving faster than ever. Now, the last 2 years have been a criminal renaissance for many of these ransomware groups. But they're not going to go away. And in fact, our own digital universe has also expanded in the process. We've added more and more digital devices to our lives. A few years ago in 2018, the Munich Security Conference put out this report about how many digital devices and connected devices are expected on planet Earth. And of course, their expectation was for 2020 to our planet Earth, our home, to be home to 3 times more digital devices than human beings. But that has been exceeded by the pandemic and its effect, the digital transformation. And of course, we now are expecting a much broader digital universe. In this digital universe, hackers and security researchers use tools like Shodan, which is a search engine for connected devices, to identify and connect all sorts of gadgets, servers, and devices that are now easily available over the internet. And of course, organizations have completely changed their digital footprint in order to match the new reality of remote work. We've all adapted and rushed to the cloud as fast as we could. We've all gotten very used to video collaboration tools like the ones we're using right now. And if you're anything like me, surrounding you at home, or even where you're seated right now in the conference center, you probably have a computer, an iPad, a cellular device. Your family members, your spouse probably has a few devices of their own. In your digital household, you probably have dozens of devices, more devices than family members or pets. So these are now part of our digital universe, and we are the ones who are responsible protecting these devices. So I'd like to offer that we can learn a few lessons from the last 2 years, specifically about an unsexy topic called cyber hygiene. The last 2 years, we learned so many lessons about personal hygiene, about social distancing, about masks, about vaccines. And whether we like these recommendations or not, they did have some effect. In the digital realm, we can actually practice social distancing by not sharing our devices and our accounts, not reusing our passwords across different accounts and giving a family member or a friend access to an online account that we use. We can use the equivalent of masks with personal protection, like 2-factor authentication, adding to our passwords with unique and long passphrases. And of course, we can imagine that just like vaccines, updates and operating system patches are tools that help us stay more protected. In a similar way, EDR, Windows Defender, endpoint protection, these are some of the basic protection layers that we can add to our digital immune system. At the end of the day, it comes down to everyday security decisions that we all make. And we're actually on the front lines of this digital immune system. But the good news is hackers can help. And there's actually more and more friendly hackers that contribute to building a friendly ecosystem of security research and discovery. So in a recent report by BugCrowd, which is a leading bug bounty platform provider, they found that during the first year of the pandemic, there was an increase in the discovery of high-risk vulnerabilities by independent security researchers. These are security researchers that participate in bug bounty programs. Programs like these help companies, like some of these very well-known brand names, collaborate with friendly hackers from around the world, identify vulnerabilities and bugs before they are discovered by a bad guy and long before somebody in the organization knows that that vulnerability is there. There's often a blind spot, and in that blind spot, that's where an external security researcher identifies the bug. Even when Log4j became a problem, thousands of reports came in from friendly hackers that were able to find different types of uses for that vulnerability and report it. So there's now actually more ways than ever for friendly hackers to be heroes. And throughout the pandemic, they have stepped up. Organizations like the CTI League, which is the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, came together as volunteer forces of hackers from around the world, working together to help uncover cyber threat intelligence about healthcare organizations and first responders that were being affected. And in the US, the Girl Scouts organization is now teaching young Girl Scouts cybersecurity skills. And I think this is extremely crucial for our future. This is why here in Israel, I started 2 nonprofit communities to help further security research in our ecosystem. The first is B-Sites Tel Aviv, which is Israel's largest security research community. And the second is the leading Cyber Ladies Network, which now has chapters in the UK, in Europe, in North America, and Asia, and brings together women in our industry. So all told, as you reflect on everything I shared with you today, can you afford to keep using the same security mechanisms, practices, and mindsets that we had before the pandemic? Are you still at the office daydreaming about what security used to be like? I think we can't afford to do that. We can't afford not to learn from hackers. This is not a time to keep calm and carry on. It's a time to adapt and to evolve. It's a time to learn everything we can from hackers. I've got so many stories to share with you, so I hope you continue the conversation. You can find me online as K3R3N3 on Twitter and on my website. Thank you so much for having me today, and I hope you stay safe. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. Take care, everybody.